Let's return to the interview between Carlson and Putin. This is the clip right after this journalist returned from the interview with Putin. Obviously, we need to know the emotions of an American after directly hearing Putin speak when approaching information from the opposing side. Obviously, this journalist does not represent the majority opinion of Westerners, but through the emotions after the interview, we can also see some illogical things being preached by the West, and Western audiences will surely recognize. These are the words Carlson said. "We just finished the interview with Vladimir Putin. I'm sitting in the waiting room at the Kremlin, waiting for the car to arrive, sipping on a cup of coffee. I'm sitting here with a stack of briefing documents. I haven't even opened the materials that Putin gave me yet. I'll read them later." It was a quite interesting interview. It started in a way that I didn't expect at all. I'm still thinking about it just happened. But of course I asked him a clear question that why he opposed Ukraine 2 years ago, in February 2022. And he said he felt a physical threat from NATO inside Ukraine. And he was concerned that they would bring nuclear weapons into Ukraine. So I asked him about that, and he started the interview. You'll see it's extremely detailed historically, going back to the 9th century on the formation of Russia, from tribes into a nation, and Ukraine's involvement in Kievan Rus. And I was quite uncomfortable, and I think, look, first of all, I'm an American, so I asked you a specific question. I want a specific answer. And he said no, and I pushed him, and he was uncomfortable, and I was uncomfortable. I think he's being selective, and to some extent. But I concluded after seeing all of this that his answer, or it's a supplement to his answer. The history of the region and the formation of his country, as well as the relationship with Ukraine, is like a foundation or part of his Ukraine policy, so it becomes much more interesting when I realize that this is a window into what he's thinking. We're back at the hotel room. I don't know. It's probably around 10 p.m. We've been there for almost 5 hours at the Kremlin. It was quite an interesting experience if you've read about the Kremlin throughout your life. I didn't find it much different from old executive office buildings. Giant 19th century buildings. Oh, Putin arrived late, a few hours as is his habit. It seems like everyone working there jokes about it. He's always late. But I'm not sure exactly what I think about the interview that just happened. I might need a year to really decide what that was all about. But a few quick insights: Putin doesn't do many interviews. He really hasn't done one in almost 4 years. He's not good at explaining himself. I think he's intelligent, no doubt about that. But obviously he's spending time in a world where he doesn't need to explain himself. So I understand that's one of the reasons I struggle to think about the entire interview, because however, if you listen carefully, and we were there for quite a while talking to him, some things, let's just say he's really hurt. And I suggest this, but of course he denies it. But clearly he's very hurt by rejection. The West and America don't like Russia. The US government doesn't like Russia. I think, like many Russians, he's hoping the end of the Cold War would be an invitation from Russia to Europe, or some part of Europe, because it's a European country that's half in Asia. But there's a lot that's very European about it. And if you go to Moscow, it's a very European city. You see it, you feel it culturally. And the West has rejected Russia. And maybe, I don't even stand on either side of this story. Maybe there are valid reasons. I don't know how they'll be anyway. The West is determined not to ally with Russia. That's very clear. It's NATO's common purpose. I guess it's to contain Russia, and Putin's hurt by that. His eyes lit up when we talked about it, as we knew. Maybe for over an hour, he didn't have a coherent theory anyway. He was willing to tell me why. Russia is not an expansionist country. Sorry. You might not be allowed to say that because all the new territories, as well as all the liars and the ideology of the foreign ministry, want to turn him into the Japanese Empire or Hitler, but that's really stupidly wrong. You have to be an idiot to think that. Russia is already too big. It's the largest country in the world. They only have 150 million people, and they have about 80 provinces or independent countries with citizenship, religion, and language. What I mean is, imagine managing everything they have. It's already enough with the natural resources. They're swimming in resources. Of course, they don't have enough people with their perspective. So the idea that they want to take over Poland, why would they want that? They just want secure borders. Maybe they're too paranoid about that, but it could totally happen again. Not taking sides except for the idea that they'll advance into Vienna or something. You'd have to be an idiot to think that. That's not true. There's actually no evidence of that, and professional liars in Washington really don't know anything about this region or really anything outside of New York. Has convinced them, or I think they're trying to convince you that this guy is Hitler and he's trying to take over this land or something similar in any way. No matter how many mistakes Putin has made, he's not an expansionist force, so I can't even remember my own main viewpoint other than to some extent he got angry, and it's obvious he's angry because he feels that way, like I thought we would become friends, and once again, it's probably his fault, but he's definitely pissed off about that. And the second thing I want to say that I think is quite impressive is he's willing to admit that he wants a peaceful settlement in Ukraine and basically just says it out loud and repeats it a few times. He might be lying in a way I don't understand, but he keeps saying it, and I don't know why he would do that if he didn't mean it. And of course, there's clear evidence that there's a peace deal or part of a peace deal. When peace negotiations started some year and a half ago, former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, on behalf of the Biden administration, negotiated it and convinced Zelensky and the Ukrainian government not to participate in these talks. What I mean is, it's a proven fact that Israeli officials were there. They revealed this, and that happened. As for Putin, you can even talk about Putin. You like to flatter Putin. I'm from California. I don't flatter Putin, please. I'm just trying to evaluate this in a really interesting and rational way. When he's willing to say, yes, we want a solution. And the last thing I'll say is, if you're wondering who the morons are, our officials have said in the record and have told me and are telling many people that part of the terms is Russia has to give up Crimea and not delve into history. But here's the fact you need to know, the birthplace of Russian warm water fleet has a population of Russian people. They had a referendum to choose Russia. That's a part of Russia where they make Russian wine bottles, so you may like it or not, but the fact is Putin will resort to nuclear war if it happens in Crimea. By the way, Crimea was under Russian control at the start of this war, so if you really think that the peace condition is Putin giving up Crimea, then you're like the morons. And what I mean is they want a weak leadership in Russia. And why do you want that? How does that benefit America? I'm not defending Russia, I'm defending my country. Think about it. A weak central government in a country with the largest nuclear reserve in the world. That's insane, especially in a country that's vast and prone to fracturing with multiple languages, races, religions. 20% of the population is Muslim. You're about to let a bunch of nuclear drifters roam free and hope for the best. You're crazy if you want that, and we're governed by a mad and tyrannical president. So what will happen? What happened in Libya when we overthrew it and let you know Gaddafi was killed? What happened in Iraq when we brought Saddam to justice? Those countries fell apart and they were never rebuilt. And once again, in Afghanistan, we overthrew the central government and they're back. It's still run by the Taliban, so our track record in bringing down leaders is very easy. Good things are not always better. And to do that with Russia, the largest landmass in the world, with the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. It's like you're using drugs if you think that's a good idea. That's the entire sharing right after Carlson's interview. There's a bit of ambiguity here because this is a quick sharing, but the entire commentary here shows that the journalist doesn't take sides on who's right or wrong, doesn't endorse Russia's solution, nor does he criticize Ukraine apart from the general impression of Putin. Regarding the interview, the journalist focuses on discussing the illogical things that the U.S. government desires from Russia. Firstly, the U.S. wants Russia to withdraw from Crimea, which only a weak government would accept. Imagine a huge nuclear arsenal in the hands of weak leaders. How does that benefit the U.S.? Secondly, Crimea has been under Russian control since 2014. The journalist doesn't say whether Russia's action is right or wrong, but raises a question about the peace condition the U.S. demands, which is for Russia to give up Crimea. Clearly, this is meaningless, so why does the U.S. persist? What's the U.S.'s purpose? Perhaps for us, these questions and their nature are easy to understand, but Carlson's words after meeting with Putin are a valuable reference for Americans and Westerners in general to see what the U.S. is really doing in Ukraine, not to pressure Russia, but for what? Certainly not for peace. Thank you for watching the entire video. See you in the next part, where I'll highlight the most important points in the interview with Putin, that the Western side accuses Putin of lying.